Yesterday's video was kind of unplanned and unexpected, and ironically, you only hear the music. My perspective was drowned out. So, in order for this to make sense and to give a few more references and talk about things I was talking about and just go through them, because I don't know if it makes total sense otherwise. But basically, I just thought I'd start out mentioning the first few things that were random that came up with it. I think I would have even left out if I hadn't mentioned them a few times, and I did here. Having to do with a possum, which is a possum I came across and helped and brought to a shelter. I was in the middle of my path and on my way to the coffee shop, and doing a headstand, and I didn't know if that was typical behavior. I looked it up and didn't find anything about it, but I did find something about possums having to do with the cults and symbology, and I was looking that up. The timing of that something about Satan. So not great. I don't know. It was weird timing it up as well with someone who pulled up in front of my house and all that could be regardless. Basically, to pull together that pattern making, which is this book, and talking about Maxwell demon paradoxes and all kinds of things like that. Moving from stable state to unstable state, changing can be a symmetrical pattern into asymmetrical pattern. To start out with, just basically to continue to you should probably have more about knowledge of thought pattern, but for those who don't have knowledge, these are basically slopers. These are the basic building blocks, you can call them slopers, that can be drafted off of your form to fit perfectly, or like this, and in different sizes. And so what you see here is a flat pattern technique. And basically, the core principles is this dart. This is a dart that is the amount of fabric you need to take out in order for the waist to go in. Talking about shapes in higher dimensions and protruding corners, so that it becomes a three-dimensional out of two-dimensional shape, and it creates a bust. And that excess fabric is the least amount of fabric that you need in order to put this to fit as a basic bodice on a form. Double, of course, this is the center front. And so you would fold it on a fold different pattern, but this on fold fabrics will double, symmetrical otherwise. I'll share some examples of asymmetrical patterns, but this amount of fabric, the core principle is that it can be increased, decreased, and moved around the bodice and turned into darts or pleats or whatever it is your stylistic preferences are, to create the design that you want. And basically just knowing how to do that is flat pattern design. You can either cut and literally cut it down to the apex or core center and literally move that amount of fabric up to the part where you want that dart to be, and or you can do it by shifting as you draw it, as you trace it, and turn it into something like that, which is a arm dart. So you close it up here and then it opens up over there. And then from that you can add volume or leave it as that, and that's how much it has to. Basically, it's this kind of idea of expanding the universe and adding volume to stylistic preferences. And in comparison to this is sleeve sloper. So that's the elbow dart. And this is the cap, and this can be raised or lowered or given different inserts, basically, which become pleats. You have to give it extra volume if you want to have anything other than just typical shoulder seam. And adding volume again, or turning this into, say, raglan sleeve or kimono sleeve. Like this top would be considered a stylized kimono sleeve basic element. Where you can have like some kind of insert basically. In that case, you would overlap this with the bodice in order to get some sort of connected shoulder pattern in the sleeve and the bodice. So, building blocks basically, and if you can think of that in terms of these essential foundational elements that go into a universe or a complete book, complete ensemble. And it's just a matter of combining these sort of basic block styles, like a notched collar, and adding your own personal touch to it. But let's see, some of these. So an example, there's some variations of what you can do with darts, and actually what I like call dart manipulation. And it's just that one is all easier on my computer, and then you put a sheet of paper. And here's another example, changing the location and adding gathers, adding accessories. So once you know these foundational rules, basically main rules, in order to break them, to add your own personal sort of style or aesthetic that you want to learn what you're trying to achieve. Otherwise, you're just kind of handing off like abstract instructions to how to make it, and you might be able to interpret it. But there's a lot of proven enough because using all those sorts of and it's very structured and very like amount that you have to overlap the sleeve sloper with the bodice sloper so that it fits correctly in a raglan sleeve. There's certain steps and very structured or determined sort of designs, but then within that you can have your seam lines or your side lines and decide what kind of plate it is you want. Cutting tight, but basically it's just shifting and adding two different looks that it excess material. So something about space-time fabric and how it's around here and all this excess, what you do with it. You can't just like cut it out and make it into a princess line for a seam. And so that's a very curved sort of pattern. But and that's what you're doing. You could divide the part here and get parallel parts. Or you just add more fabric. Come up with these interesting patterns where I'd say, you know what, I think of these shapes in higher dimensions. Something that's smooth and anything like that. Any look you're trying to achieve, any sloper that you have trapped by, but a lot you can do. You can go this much for using the verb easily, something like that. So that's a good, the design isn't the same on both sides. And I compare this with Adam and Eve and taking mythology of Eve, taking Adam's rib, the bodice, and then change. You can see how you can, the design overlaps center front, so you can just couple it after pattern. making and a pattern. And all the different variations that you can do. And you can design what looks good and figure out how you can change and reconfigure a sign block. Very technical. And this one is in a core. Add some extra flair. And do this before you make your mock-up, basically, or sample, or you can do sort of reverse using draping techniques and then draw your markings on the drape design, and then from that make flat patterns you can set up in the actual fabric. You can see how the parallels why videos together in the way that I did. And then, you know, so that you can cost, it's all about saving costs. So when you're finalizing your patterns and you want to lay them out on your fabric and cut them out and your fabric, you kind of lay them out in the most efficient way so you don't miss any fabric. And sort of just lay on that with your stars aligned. In the same sense that you would not sky kind of have to position things to make most use of materials. This is an example of a drape dress skirt with cascade. That and becomes that's the pattern. So I touched on truing, which is basically when you are finalizing your pattern piece and you have your darts and you're going to fold what you're working with as though you were sewing it, fold up the darts, and so you have a flat or straight hemline. And you trace that and then you cut it and you end up with sort of like an airplane kind of, you know, the pleats. And so it's about truing, making sure that that line is, you know, when you open it up, it's going to have this sort of like Cassiopeia true it, and you get a smooth hemline. And especially on curves, also it's making sure that those curve lines and you measure correctly when doing different pattern pieces, when creating different pattern pieces, that those lines that are going to be sewn together are exactly the same length, so that you know, like a 1/4 inch skirt on the back side longer than the front side, or pushing the side seam forward because there's an uneven amount of fabric balance in the front and back, and so extra fabric so push the side seam forward and you have like a really good skirt. So there's just so much that we could potentially do in how to implement kind of like subdivision down into like making it I talked about grading because I showed children's wear and how kids grow so fast that you could basically make a few simple patterns and then as they grow, enlarge them if they like that design. Grading, and you can buy a store like those pattern patterns and different lines and different typology, and that's why the Chanel and the Adams for Peace videos are there. And poetry in motion, bodies erosion, again, typology, arts version, rock formation, and all kinds of things like that. These are different examples of sleeves and how to get like a bishop sleeve. You have to add volume, space, and looking at basic sleeve, adding these lines to cut open with some some paper behind it taped up, and you get your new pattern. Basically, as much of a spread as you want. Each of these have to be equal. So yeah, and sometimes the altitude at plane heights and from the ground level, the cap and plane and arches basically are connecting to different patterns and fingerprints, and the arch and the loop and the whorl and the minutiae patterns, and how you could potentially translate that into Morse code in some sense, so that it wouldn't be what you're sending in the mail, be the fingerprints to put it together. So again, here's another example of the different guideposts and ways of making, there's pretty much standard ways of making a kimono sleeve or raglan sleeve. The exact amount you need to take in or overlap or whatever else, but points of movement. So yeah, grading basically once you make that pattern and you in certain areas of the movement, or you're going to expand most likely in posterior with the hips, like these are the size increases that are going to make the pattern piece and one of my pattern pieces. But yeah, and there's content to find yourself in. I'm inspiration cat toys into the bigger business. Yeah, so there's some like shapes, the held shapes that you come to know and are able to put into your designs, and they're very specific technically. The thing about it is you have more of a technical mind, step by step process, then people often enjoy that pattern making. Another very like going on mathematical equations, constructing three-dimensional objects, and then maybe more abstract these can be a little bit overwhelming to people who think more linear text-wise. But you have to know a lot of this, you need to reference it, and that's pattern like probably good enough to this little bit of information. But basically, and transfer paper, and you make a copy of that and update those seasonally. And especially when working in like men's apparel, and styles don't change as much season to season. Menswear, outerwear, like because there's not so many stylistic elements that you can incorporate. That's pretty much standard. So they are carryover styles, and you only have to do a few updates and like all the tech packs, and basically that pattern is preliminary steps to tech design. You see all the construction elements. So that quote from Godard should convey the nature of the construction commentary from watching Contempt by McCready with Godard's commentary on it. So in different contexts, I thought it's interesting how that relates, the nature of its construction, how it came together, how I made a playlist, showing the insides of a garment and the stitching, or how would you do that, like relate that to. But basically, High by the Beach, shapes and higher dimensions, superposition, through wire frames, and then going back to like the jump and stepping into your blueprints or your outline plan that you've charted out, mapped out for yourself. Again, having to do are pretty much how something goes together. It's like a guide, a visual guide, certain measurements and how we communicate in all these different ways visually and how we might translate the birth chart into sort of, phases of the astrological wheel into these other industries like flight aviation and just interesting. The He's talking about extruding shapes and high extensions. Basically, what I did with birth chart, my birth chart, I filled in the shapes the aspects made, and then turned it into 3D using Photoshop, and became those colorful sort of this sort of triangular objects images. And yeah, even with this, there's a process of sort of distillation, taking out the unnecessary and reducing excess and bulk, and that having to do with bringing back to our attention, multiverse, and that we talk about aerial view of flight control and how we've been able to identify exactly because you have to first decode into fruit and all this, but I think how maybe you have God's perspective that even, or but then also sort of an aerial smoky hazy. Da Vinci, I'm not reading it in the playlist too, but I'm taking a picture and stick it next to the Chanel campaign, just to imply that with Vinci references and Marianne's losing their religion in the background picture, which again, I never noticed that so much, that painting, the window nature outside. It looks like the painting that I painted like a few years ago. I'm just thinking that was really the same one, but yeah, these sorts of the one with the video with me on my shoulder and reference to Frida, the monk on her shoulder, and Matter's frozen time, arches, and all these sorts of things. I mean, with like tiny experiment intersection, tiny experiment curves, and create lyrical momentum, triangular complication, duration of 120 degrees, the round table, and the aspects. She said in her videos, grand triangles, because you can see each other correctly or easily and convey information messages, you can see each other at 120 degrees versus starting conjunction, which like word of mouth or like telephone, around people. So spreading out that information and having to do with like control and all these things. These are just working concepts and things that I've noticed recently in that phase and art VC sequences and laptop from protein powder formulating and routes. See things like that atom and the connection between proton, neutron, electron, and just the time that I was using light and quartz photographs. Everything things on different scales because, like I said, unless there is a scale to weigh things, and use the example of like a sin is a sin across the board, some sort of system, how would a system weigh things proportionately to the quality of the should? Any parallels and things like word to idea, tone and mood. My tiny, that was straight out of Compton playlist, Apple, into helpful in Dallas in California. Where that was a first song, whereas by changing your tone, change your tone, your cue. Example, the very beginning of the circle. That leaves and their counterparts and comparing like AI reveals and astrological reveals and talk and all kinds of concepts that sort of bring together with that it's interesting to think how communicate certain messages in these visual ways that I guess sharing with everyone felt even more of those things. And then had some sort of Morse code in the ridge minutia patterns of fingerprints. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I have a huge department, so I'm actually going. Hopefully people found this interesting and see now more so because I put those. Yes! 1 second. Thank you. Put those together pretty quickly and recorded my screen at the same time so that I can convey the nature of its construction. And yeah, just kind of figure out how to inspire and build upon, and always building upon something, building a wardrobe or a portal, building a midpoint format, building a tesseract, building a wardrobe, building a universe, multi-verse, universe soup can, references to different movements and eras in art, because art is, a lot of artists are self-taught, and art in that sense is a very visual demonstration of that, I think, and how it progresses forward and everything's change and it's like culture as well and society and mindset and what's going on in that time period and self-expression broadcasting as well, and so towards the future and to reference what's going on and what's going on in that time parallels and different similarities and periods in time and having a perceived time on different tracks, dimensions, and that might account for even time travel, if you're able to access different dimensions, having already perceived what we know to be present in the future, thinking about all these sorts of different things having to do with aircraft, and yeah, under my direction going, perhaps eventually my uncle did design for Boeing as an engineer, and space time just interesting, all these things, and how I might relate because it's scaled down to what you know, and not necessarily scaled down, it's scaled across what is you know as well. I like both of those, scaling down, and I speak to going jaywalking or, white lies. Now what is that scale exactly? And I compare it to my Jupiter and Aquarius, Justice, and Mars and Libra, and the Mars passion and desire that I think both distinguishes between AI and robots and human beings, and the desire to be power and to be known or control, which I don't know if we program into, but and yeah, it's distinction between two parallel options and synesthesia exploration is correlating factor, and how do we determine that when we don't really exactly already know that is that connective tissue DNA base to a color per se, and making those like distinctions and carrying them over and carrying into a parallel and something that you are familiar with. But objectively, you can find some way to teach yourself about concepts and so become an expert on if that's expected or necessary, especially when it's about finding connections and being able to determine and just delegate that proposal or project is more expert in certain fields or working directly with them to develop a new product and saying like inspired computing hiring within their supply agencies to develop products and gear and fashion and things working as design as well and development and all the rigorous testing that goes into it that I compared how they did by hand fingerprint minutia patterns to identifying unknown fabrics and textile class and how you'd have to go through all these different ways of testing it through determining its thread count, 1-inch piece of scorched fabric, so that you have to do variable microscope testing so you can see the difference, whether it's convolutions or scales or wool or cotton. It looks like a fiber under a microscope and then chemical tests need be, process reduction and elimination and determining some sort of unknown. And I have an example of acetates dissolving in acetone, so therefore you know it's acetate. And just characteristic factors of different things that distinguish between the varying parallel parts. More parts that would be interesting to check and then astrology. I have to go. So I hope this was interesting to people and gives them a better idea of what I'm talking about in the playlist I made. So like I was saying, and how those concepts fit together so you can appreciate them and potentially see if I'm someone, whether within that context or another, knowing that connections are what propel us forward as starting points or reflexing or secondary editing process and distillation and chemical process, lab and scrolls and transportation, and how far reaching an idea can go and time and space forward, and so spanning how many industries and trying to convert that into some sort of monetary because fashion and creating is commercial and an idea of that value of ideas because meditation plays also multiple levels up to all in hundreds, as I said in my Instagram levels, but now come to 800. It's an aerial view, but 4 sides of the universe, 4 sides of a room. The episode and that was up in the Twilight Zone episode of Love One and views of Schrodinger's cats and superposition and distance in and out of time and focal point in nature reading that I flipped through the book. I pulled a card and the world was a bird in focus and had a shrubbery around it so you can see the world card and you can read. The focal point is a camera and flash and watching the universe. Darkland and development, evolutionary process, and solution with three solution having to do with different reverse engineering aerospace craft that they were doing in World War II. We're talking all about military solution, but I'm going to connect that to astrology and Gemini and through all different names and past boyfriends and them all being Gemini and also Sagittarius and my Chiron and just a million genders and thinking about it as a branch or timeline and tesseract timeline of linear space and moving upwards in time as we build upon foundational layers that take on new iterations and both advantages and disadvantages of printmaking and narrations and fingerprints and prints and arts and that being sort of a metaphor for when you tell your own story and narrative or biography and how things can get distorted over time or people have their interpretations of a painting or a life or artist's intent and how things can go how that's appreciated and how prints are made and sold and all these kinds of things and making and Andy Warhol and but do we keep some sort of level of uniqueness and specialness within that? I'm painting my numbers and Van Gogh's all his sunflower things, paintings and Mona Lisa and Mona Lisa's smile and I was just also how the artist has a certain vision when making whether it's in fashion or look or painting and how that both evolves within the artist's life or process and how we how the viewer looks at it and how that perception evolves over time. So that perception having perspective, how visionaire, reference that, how Dior dress was made and keep setting, keep pleating and send those really tiny plates and send out to the store and specialized where they have all these very industrial machinery that roll these things with these cardboard insets the fabric and that's it to these pleats they don't fall out and how you might reverse that process. I don't know why you would need to exactly, but a lot of this is also intuitive. Like I'm not sure why coming back and talking about truing and some sort of basic process is that important right now, but I feel like it applies in some sort of context that I want to note now. And it's kind of like the aircraft dream that I had, the bleachers that went upwards in a sense and became a vertical plane. Now they sort of collapse and collapse wave and wave function and sine wave and standing wave and all these different things I was comparing that the classical bleacher aircraft and training, cleating and Cassiopeia zigzag or rick-rack, that's also in the sound for the better where it started. And back to the start in a sense and clothing or what we clothe ourselves in our second skin, textile advancement and the combination of AI and man and textile and how we protect ourselves from elements and Adam and Eve realized that they were naked and how they clothed themselves running from the weather and elements and hit you with magic wind across the face and hair. Realize that we're protecting ourselves from and perhaps pleating and treating and smooth Cassiopeia and creating a smooth hemline, stairwell, the intersection comparison to a tesseract and elevators in the corners, stairwells, and how would you access other dimensions and going up, going down, and these themselves. Don't see that up my whole life. Let's give it a penny for that. There's a lot of things that I reference in a lot, and they were talking about AI resetting because it's basically overload, too much, and like people have amnesia and how perhaps we're being haunted by Maxwell's demons and the simulation universe, block theory, SimCity reality that we think is real, but from the future is like that advanced AI, who knows? Trying to gauge these different timelines and occurrences and the importance of that in making predictions, but also in giving significance to occurrences if I were to see something that stood out to me, but then something that makes sense with it didn't happen until like months later. It still might be important, but to know for sure that it's a connection and should be considered together. The time between, space between, and chemical phase 2 lensing the elements is an important consideration. There's more meanings for experiences or occurrences that happen in life, but life artistic seems noteworthy, memorable, and then putting all that together in some sort of prototype. That's the point of the visual prototype data place. That's to introduce that concept and engaging all parts of the mind as well, and four notes and four strings, four sides of the universe, and all sides accentuating different notes as you listen to something that's cyclical in comparison to something that continues on, like a song that goes for 3 minutes, and how some notes will be highlighted visually through the choreography of the data in different points of the walls are accentuated that seem to stand out as a different note sounded with it. And I wanted to compare the neurological frequencies and getting really in depth with referencing a diagram that I before say having to do with the effects of mood based on diagrams and lines and shapes. And so that gets into the all systems go and very cubist shapes and things in higher dimensions of that happens in a sense in the spiral staircase that takes a section of it, the size of it looks more or less like a ladder. So flatlanders and smooth Cassiopeia and Trulene and connecting pattern design, space time and aircraft engineering and making something useful and have some sort of utility on multiple levels is always a goal of mine. So straightforward.